Be part of the action at the 2025-26 NRMA Insurance Ashes Series in Australia with Gullivers Sports Travel, an officially licensed travel operator for the ultimate cricket showdown down under. Experience the electrifying atmosphere of the iconic MCG during the NRMA Insurance Boxing Day test. Immerse yourself in the vibrant Ashes fever and discover all that Melbourne has to offer. From world-class sport and exceptional coffee to lively streets and an unforgettable food scene, Melbourne truly has it all. Step outside the city and uncover Victoria's breathtaking coastlines, renowned wineries and unique wildlife experiences, all just a short journey away. Head to gulliverstravel.co.uk to book your dream cricket adventure today. Hello and welcome to the Wisden Cricket Weekly podcast. The Champions Trophy group stage is starting to shape up nicely. India are pretty much through to the semi-finals. Pakistan are pretty much out of their own tournament 5 days into it. England are up against it, having lost to Australia. Australia chasing down 352 with 15 balls left spare, and New Zealand and South Africa have started confidently too. We'll be talking Champions Trophy and also what the future of Test cricket looks like for the less wealthy full member nations, and we'll be talking about the new Wisden Cricket Monthly, which has arguably our most ambitious feature yet later in the show. We've also got Mark Butcher coming up, and also Brydon Carse, who talked to Joe Harman for the new magazine a few weeks ago. I'm Yas Rana, and with me today are Phil Walker, and for the first time on the Full Weekly Show, Nathan Johns. Nathan, great to have you on. I thought I'd ask you a few quick fire questions so the masses get to know you before we get into the cricket.
You did not warn me about this.
So first up, who's your favourite ever cricket player?
John Mooney.
You're going to have to explain that one.
Oh, I grew up Bangalore, Ireland. Obviously, was one of my first kind of proper experiences. He hit the winning runs. I know Kevin O'Brien was the hero. He made that feature, Kevin.
He did, yeah. Don't reveal the other 99.
He's not number one, sadly, Kev. But no, just John Boy hit the winning runs in that.
He was the cult hero of that team, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. He was the electrician who was from a part of Dublin that has quite a big cricket culture, but it's, for lack of a better phrase, he was the hard-nosed guy amongst all the posh kids, and everyone kind of gravitated towards that. So yeah, that was kind of my cricketing childhood, was that team. And yeah, like you said, he was the hero of that team in many ways.
Would you rather watch a 1 month long test match that goes a full 30 days or watch 30 days of back-to-back T20 cricket?
Test match. Just, yeah, all the usual stuff, ebbs and flows. I mean, yeah, I've been working a lot on, as we're going to get on, just trying to make Test cricket make sense for some of the smaller nations, and I much enjoy engaging with that side of things.
Is that true?
Yeah, no,
You'd rather watch a 30-day,
yeah,
4 innings game?
Well, presumably there's more than 4 innings. You're not going to make 4 innings stretch 30.
4 innings.
Oh no, if it's 4 innings, no, change my answer.
And it actually goes 30 days.
No, because could you imagine the amount?
Well, exactly.
No, okay, I needed that context.
The Durban game took 10 days and basically wrote Test cricket off for 20 years afterwards.
Right, no. I'm not watching players bat for 4 innings for 30 days because nobody will try score any runs. So no, okay. No.
Tim Murtagh or Trent Johnston?
Tim Murtagh.
Niall O'Brien or Kevin O'Brien?
Kevin, Bangalore.
Good stuff. I feel like I know you better now. Let's start with Australia, England. So Australia successfully chased 352 at Lahore, the highest successful chase at an ICC event, the 9th highest in all ODIs, actually. Brilliant game, brilliant atmosphere, especially for a neutral game. We will get to England later, don't worry. But Nathan, first of all, what a knock that was from Josh Inglis, 120 from 86. But how big is that for Australia to get that kind of win in the can early on without so many of their first choice quicks, without their all-rounders, but also some of their biggest name batters not doing the job on the day?
Well, it's big for Inglis, isn't it? I mean, he's been in and around the setup for a long time. I think I first probably started watching and engaging with him in 2021 when he kind of got a late gig for the 100. I think he might have been Glenn Maxwell's replacement actually at the Spirit, because he was over here for a blast campaign, scored a lot of blast runs, and he was always like a very 360 player. At the risk of using a cliche, he was really good at sweeping, reverse sweeping, laps, but didn't necessarily have that power down the ground. And it was always kind of like, well, if he gets that, he could be a proper player. And type of innings like that, you're not going to score 150 unless you can play those strong shots in the V. So for him personally, it's huge. For Australia, yeah, like you said, look, It is massive. Part of me just does think it's just the classic Aussie thing of everyone will be worried about them, but they'll turn up at an ICC event just because they always do. It doesn't really matter who they play. So maybe we shouldn't be overly surprised. But he's got an opportunity, and it creates an interesting conversation if and when Kerry comes back into the frame as the keeper.
Yeah, Phil, I didn't know English was that good, to be completely honest. He averaged 23 in ODI cricket before that knock, and his ability against the England quicks, who often resort to the short ball when things are quiet, and English made a mockery of that plan, really, pulling several balls over the fine leg and long leg boundaries for six.
Yeah, it was a bit telegraphed, but towards the end, he was just waiting for it, baseball style, and going high, wide, and handsome deliberately as well. He kind of holds the bat very high up, so it gives him this natural, beautiful swing and arc. And when it's his day, he hits a long ball. I hadn't really paid much attention to him either, actually. But I did see him make that 100 in Sri Lanka and played a lot of eye-opening shots. And so we shouldn't be too surprised. And look, you don't break into that team, even if you are in the second string in inverted commas, unless you're a damn good player, right? So we shouldn't be that shocked. We should not be that shocked. But yeah, as you say, from Australia's point of view, to do it when Head and Smith and your first choice trio of seamers are, three of them aren't there and two of them don't turn up with the bat, and to still do it and do it well and do it comfortably and break a record almost with a shrug of the shoulders, that's a statement win, and pretty demoralising for the other lot.
But he's obviously, like Phil says, he's obviously good. I mean, for lack of a better phrase, he's basically been Australia's equivalent to Dan Lawrence for a while. He's just been that backup batter. He's been in God knows how many squads. He's definitely been in World Cup squads before, or ICC event squads before, I should say. So he's clearly a good player. And he's played a lot of cricket. Like I said, he's 4 or 5 years ago, he was playing well in the Blast over here and he was scoring runs. So sometimes just got to wait for that opportunity, and he's got it and he's taken it so far. Yeah,
I thought he played well against Rashid after he worked him out. I think for the first over or two, it looked like Rashid was waiting to land the googly, and he did, and he didn't read it, but it just slid down past leg stump. And he got a very, very little inside edge on one as well that would have probably hit leg stump. But after he settled in against Rashid and he played him all off the back foot, and he was driving through the covers off the back foot to good length balls, because Rashid does bowl so slowly, and so the hands were quick enough to get into the shot, even though Rashid was landing it broadly where he wanted to, and he just played him very, very well. It was just a class innings, and it felt inevitable quite a long way out. I don't know if you felt the same thing, but it felt like there's a skittishness sometimes to England in the way that they go about their innings as individuals, but there was a kind of inevitability to that Carey and English partnership, and it felt like the game drifted away from England very, very quickly.
But it's really interesting. The two of them kind of did the damage together, because when everyone's fit, it's those two guys are who takes the gloves, who gets in the 11, and obviously when one bloke hits 150, it creates a conversation, right?
Yeah, and I mean, they both made runs in Sri Lanka as well, right? Test match cricket, but quick hundreds, both of them, so they were both feeling good. And look, Australian cricket, it's going through one of its golden spells, right, at the moment. And you wouldn't be surprised if in a week or two they're playing India in the final. And
we know what happens when that happens. Yeah. Nathan, this morning or yesterday evening, Liam Livingstone gave an interview with the BBC where he said, "I don't personally think that we deserved to lose based on that performance," which is a very English at the moment sort of thing to say.
I knew you wouldn't like that.
England have lost 10 of their last 13 games at global tournaments against full member nations. This seems to be happening a lot. And I understand what he's saying. To score 352 on any surface, you have to do pretty well. But equally, Australia were 136 for 4, way, way, way behind the rate. And they end up winning quite comfortably. What did you make of what England did, particularly in the second half of that game?
Well, yeah, that second half caveat I think is important, because I think Livingstone's talking about as batters probably. I think that's what the sense I got from that interview was, yeah, we batted really well. We scored 350, 360.
Wasn't enough.
But more often than not, as a batter, if you score that, you do think you're gonna win the game. So I think that's where he's coming from. And I didn't necessarily, because we were talking beforehand, and you kind of said, what were they, 200 for 2 after 31 or something? Was it like, even though they still got to where they got to, it wasn't enough. Should they have got more? And you're kind of going, yeah, but if you've only got 2 wickets down at that stage, you're going to go really hard, and then there's always that risk of, you don't get the same output in the last 19 overs or whatever it was. So I didn't necessarily have a problem with that, even though it wasn't enough. But you're dead right. I mean, we're going to come on to this. Do they have enough variety in their attack? Is there enough specialism, either new ball or death as well in the attack? And I think a lot of people are using this game to frame it and ask those questions. But like you said, this has been an issue for a while. And while they found lots of different ways to lose over the last while, I think that bowling attack is absolutely something that needs to be discussed, because it just seems like England are going to go in with we're going to pick the four big quicks. I know Mark Wood's not a tall guy, but he's a quick bowler, and I can see why, because those guys do take wickets at more, the strike rates are lower and all that type of stuff, but their economies are also higher. And even when England won World Cups in the past, they did have a little bit more variety. So yeah, it's an interesting question.
Phil, how do you see it? There's been a lot of focus on the balance of the side and the perceived one-pacedness of the bowling attack. Sam asked, do you agree that England's selection of too many fast bowlers is costing them in white ball cricket? An attack of Wood, Archer and Carse feels very samey, and top-class players just don't get phased by pace, especially Australians.
How do you see it?
A couple of things, quite a few things at play. I think one is, I don't have an issue if all the bowlers do similar things if they're bowling well. I think a fundamental issue in the performance against Australia, but also in that India series, is the guys who were picked as the third seamers weren't bowling well enough. Carse had a really bad day. And it wasn't just because the boundaries were short, the pitch was good. There was a period in his first spell where he bowled 4 half volleys out of 6. And he sort of got Australia going when Australia were on the back foot. Yeah. And England at the moment, their duvet is not big enough, right? So every game they pick a side, because they don't have Stokes anymore, so they don't have a seamer in the top 6. They either pick a side that's batting heavy and bowling light, or bowling heavy and batting light. And we saw in India that when they go bowling heavy, the batting looks so light. You've got Livingston at 6, Overton at 7, or Carse at 7, which doesn't feel right. But the current balance of the side leaves no leeway if someone has a bad day, and Carse had a bad day. And Livingston actually bowled okay, Root bowled okay, but that wasn't enough, I think, to cover Carse. So I basically think they picking their best 50 over bowlers, and I think they're being too narrow-minded in that. I'm not comparing Carse directly just to other fast bowlers, but could you have a spinner in there? Look at what Mitchell Santner's doing this tournament. Look at what Michael Bracewell's doing this tournament. Look at Keshav Maharaj. Is there a finger spinner out there, a Liam Dawson or a Tom Hartley, that would be more effective in the middle overs than Brydon Carse? I also look at, I'll just read out some numbers. This is England bowlers in ODI cricket since the start of the 2023 World Cup. Gus Atkinson, picked in this squad, his economy rate is more than 7 runs and over. Brydon Carse, his economy rate from 9 games is 7.49 runs and over. Mark Wood averages 58 with the ball, goes at 6.53 runs and over. Jofra Archer averages 56 with the ball, goes at 6.17 and over. A handful of other names. Reece Topley averages 26. Matt Potts, who was England's best bowler against Australia last summer, averages 26. David Willey averages 23, goes at 5 runs and over. Chris Wokes, even though he had a difficult World Cup, averages 29, economy of 5.1 runs and over. So yeah, I just wonder, are they too narrow-minded in how they're constructing a bowling attack?
Well, I think you summed it up pretty well. It's stark, and it's no one can pretend otherwise, right? It's a policy that they've adopted. The 2 lads in the hutch who didn't get a game are like for likes. I'd like to have seen Saqib Mahmood, but I'm not pretending that it would have shifted the dial that much, really. Perhaps they've looked at the way Australia have done it, and basically Australia have replicated their test team in their one-day side. But the key difference is that they're 3 all-time great bowlers. And of course, if you're a great bowler, it doesn't matter what colour kit you're wearing or what colour the ball is. England have 2 players in Archer and Wood who are very similar in style, one of whom is finding his way back into the game, and the other one in Mark Wood, who is a fabulous bowler at test level, but his one-day record is not good. His numbers, and I was watching the game with a friend of mine, and and his stats came up actually as he was warming up. And it struck me. I wasn't aware that his stats don't really stack up because he's a part of that famous side, and because we see what he can do, and because he bowls clip-uppable great deliveries from time to time. But you ignore the fact that in a lot of conditions, unless he's 155 clicks, then it can work in a batsman's favour, and you only have to be marginally offline, marginally out of nick, marginally out of rhythm, and you're going to go some. Archer is going through the same problem. He's not yet returned to the levels that he was at before. He always has been a rhythm bowler, but you can see it very evidently, I think, in the last few weeks, that he's had one or two games against India in the preamble where it clicked, but more often than not, it didn't. And it seems to me that, as happens when you lose a bit of confidence in any sporting endeavour, you resort back to your mean delivery, right? And so this is what Jofra's doing. He's running in and he's just trying to bowl as fast as he possibly can all the time. But he doesn't have that at the moment in his locker, and the pitches aren't really conducive to it, and the boundaries are very short, and you're bowling against top quality players who are natural back foot players waiting for that delivery anyway. And he was far too short, Jofra, against Aussies, and it became telegraphed. And Carse, as you say, sometimes you've got to also acknowledge that someone just has a bad day, right? And Carse, he doesn't strike me as a particularly good one day. His components aren't necessarily ideal for 50-over cricket. I understand why he's good in Test cricket, for sure, because he's relentless and he'll keep coming at you. But the Nathan Ellis comparison is a very good one. You know, they don't have a specialist defensive-minded bowler in there. It's all hubristic, front foot, we're going to blow him away. And I'm not sure if that really stacks up.
Is it hubristic?
It feels a bit, because they've looked at it and said, you know, right, these are our three toughest, quickest bowlers, and that'll do the job for us. That'll do the job. But sometimes a slightly kind of like a weedy technician, you know, a Pat Brown or a Sam Curran or whoever it may be, sometimes they can become invaluable, right? In white ball cricket, and England have kind of eschewed these kinds of bowlers.
But you go back to that side that you mentioned, excuse me, the 2019 team, who opened the bowling with Jofra Archer was Chris Wokes, and he got those 2 wickets against Australia in the semi-final. Went a long way to winning them that game, didn't he?
Indeed, and I think Plunkett as well in that team was underestimated. Plunkett had a lot of different variations. You know, Carse has the same physique as Plunkett, but he's a very different style of bowler.
He's also, like Archer, like Atkinson, massively a rhythm bowler. And I think the prospect of Carse when he's bowling 90, which he was doing during the Test winter, and actually he was low 80s for a lot of the game on Saturday. Completely different prospect depending on the pace. On the hubristic comment, do you not think, Nathan, that it looks like England are trying to play ODI cricket different to everyone else, both in the makeup of their attack? They don't have a wily finger spinner, but also in the way they go about things with the bat. They aren't. If you see New Zealand and South Africa in particular, there's real preservation of wickets at times, and they look to attack. And they make sure they're 3 or 4 down with 10 overs to go and make the most of it. Whereas England, they are trying to do things slightly different to what most other teams are doing at the moment.
Well, I don't think has the batting approach significantly changed from at all in the last since 2015, since this whole reset in 10 years? Probably not. I mean, is the batting approach significantly different from when they won the World Cup in 2019? No, you could say the 2019 final, the only reason they won is because Stokes batted within himself and his strike rate was 70 or something, and on a sticky pitch. So I don't think the batting approach has changed. I don't think it's going to change. It's brought them a lot of success in the last 10 years. It's not working at the minute, you know, doing the same thing over and over again and losing. There's a point to be made about that, but I don't think that's going to change. I think the attack is the bigger issue. I don't think any team there's no one. The difference between that Morgan team and now is I think there was kind of a template for winning white ball games. England were kind of first at it. Everyone else kind of caught up with them a little bit and copied them to an extent. Now everyone's doing something different. Like India are packing their team with spin. I think they're picking 3 spinners at the minute. Jadeja, Patel, and
Kuldeep.
Yeah. You know, I don't think not a lot of teams are doing that. England are. Everyone else is trying to get a left armour in there at some point of their selection. England aren't, whereas they did before. So there's a lot of teams that are doing things slightly differently. And England obviously are an extreme example. Teams are finding different ways to win. The finger spinner example is really interesting because how often have we heard white ball cricket, middle overs, you need high pace and you need wrist spin. Well, actually, in 50 over cricket in the last 2-3 years, it has been the finger spin. Obviously, Akshar had his day out, and I know we might mention the hat trick that wasn't. But I think I don't. That's why I found your use of the word hubristic really interesting, because everyone's doing something slightly different, and England are saying, okay, well, this is what we're doing different, and to back what you're doing and what you think makes you your best version or your best team. I don't think that's necessarily hubristic. If it's wrong and it doesn't make them competitive, then obviously it's worth questioning. And I think that's what we're doing now.
Interesting point on the batting tempo, and is that actually that different to what it was when they won the World Cup? I would argue that if your players aren't as good and your balance of the side isn't quite as well balanced as it was, do you need to do something slightly differently? I think it's quite interesting.
So do you think the players aren't quite as good? I for what it's worth, the huge change that I notice is that Joe is batting 4 now. I mean, that I know they want to get Smith at 3 and they want him impacting the game, and he probably is one of those players you could say is as good as that previous crop. But to me, I don't. That doesn't look right to me. Joe Root coming in at 4.
So I think that does make sense because they're not as good. So there's a really interesting article from Tim Wigmore in the Telegraph last week about England's struggle to bat at like cruise tempo. Yeah. So in the middle overs, can you just go at 5.5 and not lose any wickets? And it's really interesting looking at the England numbers at different phases of the innings before they won the World Cup and after they won the World Cup. So Root, before they won the World Cup, averaged 70 in the middle overs at a strike rate of 90, which is, despite him not scoring 100 since the World Cup, is exactly the same since. His issue is, and this sounds like a lie, but it's not, he actually averages 6 in the power play. 6 in the power play from like 23 innings since the 2019 World Cup. His issue has been England are losing wickets early on. Roy and Bairstow were so good. They would score England would finish 70 without loss half the time at the end of power plays. England don't have that at the moment. So I understand why Root going down to 4 actually makes sense. Same with Buttler, actually. Butler's record in the middle overs isn't actually that good. He averages 30 in the middle overs, which is quite a lot down from the best players in the world.
I like the setup. I like the lineup. I think they had to prioritise the extra batsmen personally, and I have some quibbles with certain personnel, but I don't have any issues with the lineup itself and the composition of it. The England lost the game. Sure, they're a very samey and non-hubristic pace attack, and that deserves to kind of take top billing on this. But their middle order, 5, 6, 7, made 40 runs in 44 balls. And that's where they lost the game, I think. Brooke played a shot to me that spoke of a cluttered mind. He faced, I think, 1 or 2 deliveries from Zampa.
Yeah, it was a second ball to Zampa.
Second ball from Zampa. Yeah. Buttler didn't play very well, but managed to scrape his way up to 30 odd in a run of ball, and Livingston was all at sea again. And they all got caught on the boundary, and they combined, they didn't manage to score a run of ball. Now, Duckett's doing something remarkable at the other end, but that's where they lost the game in there, for sure, for me. And sure, 350 looks like a big score, but it's not that big a score on as flat a road as you're going to get in modern cricket when the boundaries are short and you're playing against the Australians. It's not that big a score.
What was the stat you had on Zampa in terms of what Duckett got against him versus what everyone else got against him?
So Duckett hit 50 off 36 against Zampa. The rest of the England batters were 14 for 2 off 24 balls, and those 2 wickets were Root and Brooke. I thought, to give Australia a lot of credit, I thought they were very, very smart in the last 10 overs. So Marnus Labuschagne bowled 4 of the last 10 overs, right? And
yeah, Smith captained them brilliantly.
Yeah, and I think on your point about England's middle order, that was directed at Liam Livingstone, I think. There's a perception that Liam Livingstone is not a very good player of spin. England want him to bat 7 and hit the last 10 overs, which you hope are against pace, but Smith was like, well, hang on, I've got spin in the locker, I'm going to use it. Spencer Johnson hadn't gone great up until that point in the game, so he bowls 4 overs of Labuschagne and lots of Nathan Ellis at the death, who almost exclusively was taking pace off the ball, and England really struggled. England get to 350, thanks in part actually to that Archer blitz at the end off Labuschagne's final over. Labuschagne had actually gone very, very well up until that point, and England score 83 in the last 10 overs, which is pretty good. But given that part-time spin bowled 40% of those overs and they had so many wickets in hand, I'm not sure how good that was. And I agree with Phil that is, I think, where England lost the game more than anything else. Just on Duckett, that was an extraordinary innings, 165, one of England's highest in ODI cricket. He is showing the template of how to bat in ODI cricket.
Well, you talk about is this generation good enough to play with the tempo of the previous? I mean, Duckett is probably one of those who you would say is definitely in that camp, isn't he? Yeah, I don't know. I wasn't particularly surprised, put it that way. I think an innings like this has been coming from him for some time.
Phil, how impressed have you been with Duckett, not just in this game, but also ever since he moved to the top of the order?
Yeah, well, I mean, he could be England's best all-format batsman at the moment. It's, as Nathan says, it's been due because he's been very consistent up to a point of 60 to 80. But I think the game situation helped him just throttle back a little bit here and there. But he was never too passive either, and there were a couple of moments where you wondered if he would sit on his bat a bit, but then he came down at Maxwell and clobbered him and wasn't cowed by Zampa either. It was a brilliant innings by a very, very good player. And as we were saying a few weeks ago, he is potentially world-class, and yet he doesn't have the numbers yet. And perhaps this is another statement by him. Perhaps this can usher in the next stage where all he's got to do is just sharpen up by 3 or 4%, be maybe slightly colder in certain moments, and then you're talking about a world-class player. It had Robin Smith 93 Edgbaston vibes. I don't know if that means anything at all to you boys.
I know that he got a lot of runs that day.
167 not out, I think it was, against Australia. And Mark Waugh got 100 and they cruised it with about 2.5 overs to spare.
Couple of stats in this game. This was Australia's first win in any Champions Trophy game since 2009.
Oh, there goes my point about them in ICC events then.
And the other one is that England's record of not having beaten Australia at a global event away from Edgbaston for, I think, something like 35 years still holds.
Really?
So
Wow.
England have beaten them at Edgbaston in the 2019 World Cup and at least 2, maybe 3 Champions Trophy games, all at Edgbaston in the last 20 years, but nowhere else. So that record continues.
Yeah, I was at the one in 04. Yeah. Vaughan made 80 odd not out.
Oh, wow.
Start of a new dawn, that was.
Okay.
Highest score he ever made, I think, in
Probably
one-day
was.
cricket.
Probably was. Anyway, we're busy on the old Patreon. Dailies after every England game. So we've got the Afghanistan game, which is obviously huge for England, coming up on Wednesday. And then, Phil, you're on Saturday for the game against South Africa.
For the dead rubber.
It could be a dead rubber.
Yeah,
it could
brilliant.
be a dead rubber.
So 2 wins does it, or could it be one of these garbled situations where it comes down to run rate, everyone wins
Could
2
easily
games?
come down to net run rate.
Right.
You could get through with 1 win. Also on the Patreon, by the way, last week we did a thing picking an ODI 11 of the 21st century. And we also started that conversation by spending, 12 minutes on famous interactions with non-cricket people, but about cricket.
I thought that was superb content, by the way. And you pissed all over it. You thought it was rubbish.
I didn't think it was rubbish. I just thought that as a percentage
You thought it was
of the show-
excessive?
Yeah, that's the right word.
I didn't think it was anywhere near enough.
Anyway, this week we have a deep dive into that particularly ambitious magazine feature, 100 hundreds that changed the world. Remember, you can get involved from just a £5 a month plus VAT. Anyway, next up, Mark Butcher. Butch, when Australia were 136 for 4, England were overwhelming favourites, and Inglis and Kerry batted so well, and Maxwell got them over the line as well. But from an England point of view, what do you think went wrong? And do you think, as a lot of people are saying, the balance of their side at the moment isn't the most diverse? And as a batter who's in nick on a good pitch, once you get your eye in against it, you can really make hay.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, let's go back to the batting effort, right? That we've sort of spoken about. The deficit, I suppose, in terms of being able to manage not only sort of getting through the power play at a reasonable rate without having to go completely mad, losing too many wickets in doing that, and then completely flatlining in terms of scoring rate through the middle period of the innings in recent times. Well, I mean, all of that went pretty well, didn't it? I mean, Duckett's innings was fantastic. The partnership with Root kept things going at 5.5 sixes through the middle. I suppose that the disappointing thing, and partly feeding into what you're talking about the balance of the side, is that having given themselves a platform to perhaps make 380 into the innings was kind of disappointing. In the old days, in the Owen Morgan days, we were lethal at the end, having given ourselves a platform to kind of go large in the last 10 overs, and we've not been anywhere near as good at that in recent times. And the guys charged with doing it, I suppose, Liam Livingstone was down at 7. And then, even though Jofra played a lovely little cameo at the back end, those sorts of things are very few and far between. If Livingstone doesn't go completely mad at the end there and play the sort of innings that we know he's capable of playing, then, the sort of the heavy finish is not necessarily inherent in the DNA of the 11 that they've got at the moment. And then on the bowling side of things, again, it's curious to me because, as you said, they were 4 down Australia in a bit of bother, really. And I guess, given what England had on the park, right, the worries before the start of the game was going to be, the 5th bowler, right? It's being shared between Root and Livingstone. Well, that actually went incredibly well. So Jos Buttler can be forgiven, I think, for perhaps not trusting them to keep going when they were going as well as they were. Because as soon as that partnership was broken, Carey came to the crease, maybe because he was left-handed, I don't know. But they kind of dragged those 2 guys out of the attack and went back to pace. And there was the rub, right? So you'd go, okay, well, we'll go to our wicket-taking bowlers. The guys have been picked in the side to do exactly that at that moment because we're going in for the kill, and it didn't work. The biggest is the moment is the lack of penetration or the lack of kind of ability to build any pressure between the two, between Archer and Wood, between the two of them. Yes, they bowl wicket-taking deliveries. Yes, they have pace, but my goodness me, they go for a lot of runs in the midst of doing that. And so, I'm finding it quite difficult to really sort of to criticize their performance overall. I just think that there were certain things that we did very, very well, and other things that we were not quite as good at. And then Australia come along and play brilliantly. What a knock that was.
It's an extraordinary knock, and yeah, it's one of those where just because a team loses, you don't have to say they've done badly. But I suppose 2 thoughts on it. So first, on the batting, obviously 350 is a good score, and I completely agree with you. They should have got more, given they were 200 for 2 after 30, and Labuschagne bowled 4 of the last 10 overs as well, right? The other thing I'd say though is that it didn't feel like the most sustainable way of getting a big score, given how well Duckett played, right? You still had 2 wickets very early on. Salt and Smith both caught mid-on. Harry Brook played a wild shot, his second ball against Adam Zampa, which meant that so much of the work had to be done by a very small group of batters.
I agree. I do agree with that. But I also think that a lot of the time, and this goes back again to what we were saying before the tournament started, was that a lot of time big totals are based around 1 guy or 2 guys or maybe 3 at tops, making significant contributions. You very rarely get an innings where all of the top 6 kind of go out and do what they're capable of. I just think that, if you put it this way, it's England's best batting performance, setting a total in one of these tournaments for a very, very long time, and they still lost. I think therein lies the rub. And the warning signs have been there for a little while. I mean, I go back to the series in the West Indies that England lost in the 50-over competition. And you had Saki and Jofra opening the bowling for most of that period of time. And Saki was superb, was able to kind of like hold line and length and take wickets and stuff. And no matter how well Jofra bowled, he was still going at 6s, 7s, 8s. Mark Wood kind of, I think he's been given the right role, by the way, in opening the bowling. He didn't get the ball to swing a great deal. But however, he's still somebody that generally goes at the higher end of the run of the economy rates whenever he plays, no matter what role he's doing. And therefore, the dilemma for Jos Buttler is that the guys that he probably should have trusted a little bit more were the guys who were not in the team to do the job that they were supposed to be doing, i.e., Livingstone bowled. I thought he bowled fantastically well. Short looked a little bit sort of stiff, and he certainly didn't look anywhere near as dangerous against spin as he had done against the pace at the beginning. Carey perhaps is not somebody that you'd say, okay, well, he's going to come out there and destroy the spin, so you'd be able to build up a little bit more on him. Inglis looks to be a fantastic player no matter what. I mean, he just made brilliant century in Sri Lanka on turning pitches there, so he's got no problem against either. And while you're watching the game and you're kind of thinking to yourself, well, okay, well, they've kind of got away with the fifth bowler thing. They've got through 11, the two of them, and they've done really, really well. But actually, at that moment in time, hindsight maybe. But if you're going very, very nicely with those guys, then just keep them going until such a time as you don't need to anymore, perhaps. But that it's a difficult call to make for a captain who has bowlers that he has a lot of trust in, or being paid to do that job. And guys who are there to fill in. He thinks he's got away with the fifth bowler thing. We don't need him anymore. But actually, in the conditions, they perhaps were going to do a better job than the guys who were being paid to be the frontline bowlers. And that's a nightmare. That's a horrible thing to happen to you as a skipper.
Yeah, and I'd say that what happened and what played out isn't the first time it's happened. I think Livingstone's actually done a pretty good job with the ball for England for quite a long time. In this game, if you go head to head, his opposite man is Maxwell, and Livingstone is a fair bit more economical than Maxwell was. The issue is when England are batting heavy and bowling light at the moment, there's so much pressure, particularly on who that third seamer is, because they have to bowl 10 overs, basically. And this is the third game in 4 where the third seamer has not just gone the distance, they've gone at 10s. Happened to Atkinson in one of the ODIs in India, happened to Carse in one of the ODIs in India, and happened to Carse here. And I know that he's managing an injury. News just came through now that
looks like he might be out. Yeah,
exactly. But it feels like England have been quite dogmatic about how they view what seamers should be in ODI cricket, in that they need to be tall, fast guys who can capable of hitting 90 miles per hour. Do you think they missed a trick in not picking someone like a Potts, like a Wokes, like a Topley? Someone like Potts, for example, he was numerically England's best bowler against Australia in the ODIs at the end of last summer. He got Steve Smith out a couple of times. There is still room for bowlers like that in ODI cricket, right?
Again, sort of the two places where England have played their most recent 50 over. In fact, you can add the West Indies to that a little bit as well. Are pitches whereby perhaps the faster you bowl it, the easier it is to score. And so therefore a little bit of guile is perhaps missing. But again, unless you're going to go for out and out variety, in which you're looking at the likes of Topley perhaps, or even Overton, I suppose, who offers something slightly different to the others. There wasn't a great deal of leeway or wriggle room for England given the 15 men they had out there. Look, I don't know. I mean, barring having another sort of like quality white ball spin bowler in the squad to choose from. Hello, Liam Dawson. I'm not entirely sure that any other combinations of right arm fast or fast medium bowlers would have made the difference for him. But a real sort of misfortune, given that Carse at times during the India series was the outstanding bowler for them. In that middle period role as well, that he was injured and is now looking like he might struggle for the rest of the tournament. And again, you couldn't blame the management for going, well, Carse is almost the first name on the team sheet. We're going to build the rest around him before it started. So again, there's not a place that I would look, to be honest. I do think, however, that the senior guys of Wood and Archer have got to be better. I mean, I think it's as simple as that. I don't think you can have two of your senior bowlers. Imagine, for example, sort of like you're kind of expecting Trent Boult and Matt Henry to go at 8s. You wouldn't be expecting that, would you? But at the moment, you kind of expect that of Wood and Archer, and they're kind of our two most senior, best, if you like, fast bowlers. And at the minute, they're kind of not living up to that billing to any extent, whereby England could safely put a pass score or just above pass score on the board and think, crikey, we're going to be okay here. So that's a bit of a worry.
On Liam Dawson, by the way, I fear that our weekly mentions of him have maybe got back to the man himself. He gave us a follow on our Instagram page the other day, And I was like, that's an interestingly timed follow, Liam.
Well, he's I know Dorse is a great fan of yours, mate. I'll put it that way, and of the podcast in general. And that's probably because we're very often sort of singing his praises and in bafflement as to how he's been ignored for so long. But I mean, these things, it doesn't matter, does it? But we don't do this for the likes from the players. This is for the punters.
No, absolutely. I just wanted to ask, Wood and Archer were two guys who were central to England's World Cup win 6 years ago. Archer was England's cheat code, pretty much. You know, he was so incisive in the power play. At all phases of the innings, barely went for runs. I think he went at under fives that tournament, which, you know, other than the final, was a very high scoring tournament. There was a really interesting segment during the game from Simon Doull, sort of very meticulously looking at how Archer's action, despite his pace being pretty good, it not being quite what it was pre-injury. In a way, it's remarkable that he's still able to bowl close to 90 miles per hour, given how long he's been out of the game. Do you think we need to realign our expectations with him for the moment, given how much cricket he's missed?
I don't know. I mean, probably, given the results that we're seeing, but it kind of isn't. It isn't the spectator's job or the critic's job to realign your expectations of the players. It's the people who are picking the team. You know. So if he's out there and he's taking the new ball for England and he's kind of like our number one strike bowler, then our expectations of him are to operate as that. But I think it's been evident ever since his comeback. So you go back to the sort of Australia series at the back end of last summer in September, that what was a great asset of his beyond the pace and everything else was that he bowled a very consistent hard length where the ball would travel over off stump and middle stump and make it incredibly difficult without having a hack or without trying to perhaps pull something that wasn't quite there or give yourself a bit of room in order to score square of the wicket and use the pace. And one of the things, and perhaps this is part of an alignment difference since he's come back and is perhaps tried to take a little bit of the pressure off the elbow in his action somehow. That line now tends to be a lot wider of off stump, either wider of off stump or down the leg side. Two things which batters are absolutely delighted with when there's that much pace on the ball. So more than anything, I think his control of line and perhaps a little bit of length, but not as much, has kind of deserted him a tiny bit, or at least to the extent where batters, as good as they are in white ball cricket now, they're not frightened of, or they're not sort of, cowed by the pace. They're just looking for angles and areas in which they can use that pace to score. And until such a time as he's able to kind of zero back in on that top of off stump, over off and middle kind of, offering you absolutely nothing without taking a risk, then these players will, particularly on these very good pitches, are going to take toll. And so there it is. With somebody like Mark Wood, never had that same sort of control of length and therefore control of his economy. It was kind of more, more of a shock type bowler, more of somebody that if there was a little bit of swing or something happening, he can make things happen for you. But also, bouncer, get it up there. Get batters. Great bowler to have if you take a wicket and suddenly you're looking to kind of burst through and all the rest of it. But you were never expecting him to be as sort of forensic as somebody like Joe. And so at the moment, between the pair of them, they're not taking bags of wickets. They're not knocking over three or four in the power play, but they're also going at quite elevated rates. And that's a real problem. And something that they're going to be aware of it for sure. And something they're going to have to work very, very hard to get right. And what we got, 2 games. We got to win the next one, otherwise it's done. So, again, I go back to the very beginning. It's a shame that that given everything that was said in the run up to the tournament, England kind of got quite a lot right. Australia's batting was brilliant. They thoroughly deserved to win the run chase. And the areas which have kind of been letting them down outside of the batting, or at least the sort of like the back end acceleration, and then the economy rates of their better bowlers with the ball, are the 2 things that cost them the game.
As you say, absolutely all to play for in the next week. Afghanistan on Wednesday, South Africa on Saturday. Cheers for your time, Butch. Catch you next week when it might all be over for England.
It could be, but let's hope not, eh?
We're marking the return of the Champions Trophy by partnering with WPA Health Insurance, the only which recommended health insurance provider in the UK for the last 2 years in a row. Offering health insurance plans for individuals, families and companies of all sizes across the UK, WPA is based in Taunton and is a long-standing partner of Somerset County Cricket Club. Our moment of the week this week is Virat Kohli reaching 3 figures, his 51st ODI 100 off the last ball of the India-Pakistan game. Phil, 2 things. Regardless of his up and down form in Test cricket, he's still an absolute titan in ODI cricket.
He's the greatest.
But also, this gave the game something to be excited about towards the end. Would he get to his 100? Because there wasn't a lot else that was that exciting about this match.
No, I found it quite hard to watch the chase because there's so much obvious build up to this thing, and so much of world cricket's health hangs on these fixtures, and yet these fixtures are so often awkward affairs because they're invariably one-sided. I'll never forget the Old Trafford game that I was at, which was a similar case in point, although obviously India batted first in that one. But yeah, look, there was some confected excitement and jeopardy around whether Kohli would get 3 figures or not. But I have to say, I wasn't studying it, and I certainly wasn't on the edge of my seat. There was a brief moment in India's innings after Shaheen cleaned up Rohit when Virat came in, but he had the look in his eyes, he had the fire in the eyes. That nonetheless, there was still the possibility that they might winkle 1 or 2 out, and they could be 80 for 3. Probably, almost certainly, still lose the game, but it could at least be a bit of a scrap. And it wasn't a road, so you never know. 2-4-6, whatever it 2-4-2. And there was a couple of little moments. Virat top edge or kind of toe edged one down to deep third, and it dropped just short of the fieldsman down there. But if that had gone to hand, then Virat would have gone. And there was another moment, and then Sharma was dropped at mid. Gill was dropped at mid wicket, and that was around 70 for 1, 80 for 1. And another day it could have been a more interesting chase. But when that one went down, when that chance went down, then the game was done. Because they only had a tiny, tiny window, and it would have been unlikely anyway. But at least it would have been a contest. I found it quite hard to watch and quite demoralising. Really, I hate to see Pakistan go out of their own tournament, outside of their own country, within a week of it starting. That's a tough one to swallow for a neutral. And you just want these games to justify the circus around it, and invariably they don't.
The circus to me feels increasingly forced.
Yeah, for sure.
This one, the build up to this one didn't feel anywhere near it. Even New York in June, it was not. I just don't know. In my own little echo chamber and social media bubble, I just didn't see this anywhere near the same build up or kind of chaos prior to the game.
Do you worry for Pakistan a little bit? Bottom of the WTC, they lose against the US in the T20 World Cup, out of their own own tournament anyway. 4 days into it, I know they got that Test series win over England, but other than that, this has been a really quite grim 12 months for Pakistan cricket. And you look at individuals, not that long ago, Babra and Rizwan were seen as some of the best all-format batters in the world. Both have serious question marks over not just their intent, which I think is quite a simplistic conversation, but actually just like, can they score quickly in a low-risk way against the best bowlers in the world? Shaheen's not quite the same bowler that he was. Naseem's not quite as quick as he was. Haris Rauf's not quite as effective as he was. The talent was there, but somehow Pakistan are underperforming in every format.
Yeah, do they have that kind of that Joe Root, that what was it 90 at, or what was it, averaging 70 at a strike rate, 90? Yeah. Do they have that? I think they missed Saim Ayub at the top of the order. He's injured, isn't he? I think what's his ODI strike rate? It's like 106 or something. So that takes a lot of pressure off the Rizbar. Yeah, that's what they call him, the Rizbar. And he's not around. That's something to factor in. I mean, it doesn't look like a happy camp, doesn't it? The viral clips of Rizwan screaming at Shaheen when he gets nicked for 4, and you're just kind of like, hang on, that's the top of off ball, and it's been nicked by a slog over cow over third man. Like, why? It doesn't look happy. Obviously, there was the whole stuff with the test coach that kind of happened, and Gillespie, and he was quite vocal about the way he was treated. So it just seems the way things are going, the way things are run at the minutes, the leadership on the field, the leadership off the field. There's a lot of chaos. Might be a strong word, but it doesn't look like a happy camp, and that's quite clearly seeped into the on-field stuff.
I think there's a bit of a lack of top class with the bat that's been the case for Pakistan cricket for a long time, really. If you look at it across the formats, Babar is a world-class player, although streaky and susceptible to getting a bit down on himself, I think. He's not a machine-like player at all. And they have talent, of course. Salman Aghar's a good player and the opener, as you say, is a good young player. But they don't seem to have like a battery of world-class batsmen really coming through. And that hasn't been the case for a long, long time, really. There's always, certainly in this century, the quicks, there's been more top quality quicks than there have been top quality batsmen. And for whatever reason, they do struggle to produce ready-made multi-format batters who can do the job. Some players burn brightly for a little bit of time, but then drift away. I always thought Imam ul-Haq was a good player.
Abdullah Shafiq, I thought, was brilliant when he first came through.
Looked fabulous and yet inexplicably fell away in the Test game. So for whatever reason, and again, it's a crass comparison, but India have this depth of batting talent and versatility in that cohort of players, and Pakistan just don't have that. They do not have that, and the days of relying on raw magnetic natural ability. The game is too refined now, and it's too remorseless now, and so it is a tough time for them. It's a tough time for them. Shan Masood is a very likable, unifying kind of presence in the Test side, but a limited player again, and you know what will happen? There will be a big clear out again. There'll be a big clear out, and they'll try and rebuild something again. But it will be piecemeal, and it will be a little bit ramshackle.
But if someone like a Babar, if you put him into a different team environment,
Yeah,
where
totally.
he's back to the hilt, if he played for England and got told how good he was every single day of the week, are we talking about one of the world's best batters? I mean, he's been stripped of the captaincy, he's been resigned. Like Shaheen's had issues with the captaincy as well. It just seems like there's so much going on that how these guys just focus on the cricket and focus on their game and just are allowed to. It doesn't seem that they are. I don't know. And it's not just Babar. I think there's a couple of players who...
No, but you're bang on, because he is slightly marooned in this setup, because he is their world star. He is the first batsman that's come along who is good enough to be in that top bracket conversation since Mo Yusuf, really. Yunus Khan, the numbers are great, but he was never considered to be talent-wise a top player, and he would say so himself. Mo Yusuf was the last world-class middle-order player that they had, and that's a long time ago. Unless I'm forgetting someone obvious. I don't think I am. So Babar has to live with that. But whereas in India, a Babar-like player would be inoculated or protected by the presence of lots of other good ones.
I thought this exactly when...
He is marooned. He's stuck on his own, isolated.
I thought that when Kohli was batting, actually. It's so much easier to be out of nick if you're Kohli or Gill or Iyer than it is if you're Babar.
Yeah.
Because the weight of expectation is so disproportionate at one person. On Babar, a lot of people sort of, I think, retrospectively rewriting the record a little bit about him as an ODI player. The intent stuff, I completely get in T20 cricket.
He looked beautiful for half hour and then just nicked off, right?
Exactly. And in 50 over cricket, someone brought up this scorecard from just 2 years ago. Pakistan played Australia in an ODI at Lahore, actually, and Pakistan successfully chased down 350. On that day, Babar 114 off 83 at number 3 in an epic win. He has been a truly world-class ODI player in the not too distant future. Someone who is a truly world-class ODI player at the moment is Shubman Gill. His 100 against Bangladesh in that first India game was breathtaking.
You know, players where there are certain shots that encapsulate an era, as in signature shots from certain players. Like the Ponting front foot pull, that kind of stuff. His short arm jab shot off the front foot over mid wicket against anyone. That is one of the shots, the signature shots of the era. The more he bats, the more I step away from the future of batting top Fab 4 punt that we took on the magazine. And we went with his mate, Jaiswal, sure, who's not a bad player himself.
Can't get in the team.
Yeah, I know. But you watch Gill and you think, my God, he's blessed with something very, very special.
Yeah, but everyone likes watching the lefty more, don't they? There's something about that.
Yeah. This is it. But no, what a player. And that is what, sorry, Shaheen as well, when he just ran down the pitch and just punched him straight back past him, head height. He took the piss. He milked him. He milked him, really.
If you haven't watched the game, watch the highlights. It's a 7-minute highlight video on the ICC website. Some of the shots from Gill, I know that Kohli is a guy who gets 100, but some of the shots from Gill are so good. Anyway, India, best side in the tournament so far, but they've also produced the funniest moment by a mile in the tournament. Nathan, you put in an early request for this to be on the running order. Talk us through it. Axar Patel on a hat-trick, nicks off the Bangladesh number 7, goes straight to first slip, but Rohit Sharma drops it.
Yeah, it was like, what, waist high? Like perfect, like fingers, perfect slip catch positioning, lovely height. I mean, I'm pretty sure we've all been in that situation where you're playing a club cricket and once every 3 years, someone takes 2 and 2 and you go 2 slips to gully, short leg, silly mid off. And you either inevitably get put at like short leg or second slip and you never feel there. You shouldn't be there in your own rights. And somebody says to you, oh, don't drop it. But I've never actually seen somebody drop it. And for the first time I've seen that to be at that level rather than a clubby. Oh, it's brilliant. I'm not, the thing is, and everyone will know somebody who they've played with, who, if they did that if you did that to them, they'd never speak to you.
Yeah, I mean,
I probably wouldn't speak to him if someone did that to me. But
I found his reaction so funny. Just like actually thumping the ground repeatedly as hard as he could, because that was as easy as it could have been. The catch.
Oh, I think slip catches off especially because with spinners,
quite a loopy catch.
Yeah, because they normally go quite quick off spinners,
high,
especially because so like the quicker, flatter finger spinners, quite often you might get a nick on the back foot, which in those ones absolutely fly. So to get a little soft hands nick, I just couldn't believe it. And of course, it started a bit of a Kohli Rohit culture wars of apparently Kohli dropped one and apologized, but Rohit didn't apologize or something like that. There was some nonsense like that doing the rounds, and that's all part of it.
Some of the stuff about the on-field behaviour in India players just gets blown completely out of proportion on social media. I saw a viral post congratulating Kohli for tying someone's shoelaces the other day. There was also an ICC video on their Instagram page got multiple millions of views for Kohli going up to Abrar Ahmed, just patting on the shoulder, being like, well bowled, as if like no one has ever done that before. Anyway, elsewhere in the tournament, New Zealand and South Africa have started well. We're recording this during the Bangladesh-New Zealand game. Bangladesh currently 184 for 6 after 41. For New Zealand in their first game against Pakistan, hundreds for Will Young and Tom Latham. O'Rourke and Will Henry were brilliant up top. Ben Phillips took a ridiculous catch at backward point to get rid of Rizwan. South Africa beat Afghanistan. Ron Rickleton continued his outstanding form with 100 there. South Africa have a slightly different balance to their side compared to the 2023 World Cup. They've basically picked Wian Mulder in as a second all-rounder over Tabriz Shamsi, gives them a bit more batting depth, and Mulder went well with the ball against Afghanistan. A story from India's game against Bangladesh, the Champions Trophy logo that is displayed in the corner of the broadcast did not have Pakistan's name under it like it did for the first game. The PCB wrote a letter to the ICC about it. The ICC said it was a technical error, which it almost certainly was, but the optics were not great.
Well, they've also written to them because wasn't the Indian anthem accidentally played as well?
Instead of the Australian one before the England-Australian game.
And that was what, like a day after, so I think they've written to them twice in a few days. Like, it's just what I mean. Yeah, are they? I don't know. It's depressing, isn't it? Because whether they're actual mistakes or not, the fact that, of course, everybody has that reaction, don't they? Everyone goes, well, yeah, well, it's a depressing reality of the geopolitics of international cricket.
Yeah, they've not accidentally played the Bangladeshi anthem before the Indian one, have they? Anyway, that's it for part 3. In part 4, other cricket. As you might be aware, we've been working with our partners Manual over the last 4 weeks. 1 in 4 men in the UK suffer from low testosterone levels, and you might be one of them. The at-home blood test kit is a ridiculously quick and easy way to find out your testosterone levels and what might be causing you to have symptoms like a lack of focus, low energy, sudden weight gain, or poor sleep quality. Phil, I believe you have your results back.
I don't yet have them.
You don't? Oh, no.
No.
We'll have to revisit this on next week's show to see how you're doing.
They were in the post, and I wait probably within the next 24 hours, literally.
Yeah.
That I will find out.
Wow.
Yeah, cat on a hot tin roof. I am.
Well, you're not on next week's show, but we're going to have to record.
I'm not going to be on for a while, so I will send you through a voicemail. I'm going away for a bit.
Are you?
Yeah.
Are you actually going away, or are you just?
No, I'm going on holiday.
Where are you going?
We haven't decided, but maybe Cape Verde.
Oh wow!
but we haven't decided for sure. I'm going to take a week off before the all this stuff starts.
Okay, nice.
Also, I've really overstayed my welcome. I mean, you didn't really want me on this one. You'd rather
That's
Ben,
not
but
entirely
I got to
true.
come in
but
and do the magazine.
It's not entirely true.
No, but it's kernels of truth.
But anyway, if you want to check in with yourself at Manual, you can try a test kit and save 45% on it with a code weekly45 at checkout. Nathan, away for the Champions Trophy, the T20 leg of the Ireland-Zimbabwe tour has been severely affected by rain. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, one of the two games they've completed. So the first one was rained out, and the second one there was a delay. Don't think they lost any overs, but yeah, Zim won that, so it's 1-0 Zim. Last game's on Tuesday. Yeah, Tuesday.
More generally on Ireland and Zimbabwe, you wrote a really good piece for the upcoming magazine on the future of Test cricket for the less wealthy nations, particularly those who are not in the World Test Championship. It's a big question. What does the future hold for them in Test cricket?
Your guess is as good as mine. It's funny.
Is this your mastermind subject? Do you think
what Test cricket or
the future of Test cricket for the so-called minor format?
Got to be John Mooney.
John Mooney. Yeah, there's a few.
As seen through the prism of John Mooney.
There's a few stories there. All right. Yeah, well, there's funny because that piece actually that started as I wanted to write like a kind of a happy, because Ireland have this portable makeshift honours board they carry around everywhere. People have probably seen it on social media. It's like, probably smaller than the width of this table. And somebody would it's the team manager who has incredibly neat handwriting, just writes every 5 for an 100. And Matthew Humphreys took 5 against Zimbabwe in Bulawayo a few weeks ago. So I messaged Phil saying, isn't this nice? Let's make a nice mag feature, put a nice picture of it. And, we can talk about, isn't it nice, little old Ireland with their nice honours board. And he goes,
very smoothly done.
And Phil goes, yeah, do that. And also tell us how the hell they're going to save Test cricket.
It did make the cut though. The image did make the cut into the piece.
So yeah, it turned out into a nice, like what I thought would be a nice little magazine feature to fix the game. So, it's been in the news. Lots of reports that they're strongly considering Division 2 of a World Test Championship. I mean, Ireland are clamouring for it. I interviewed Andy Balbirnie, the Test captain, a few weeks ago, and kind of unprompted, he said it's really interesting. They're framing it almost as how they framed the push for full membership. So if we win enough games at World Cups, white ball games, they can't ignore us any longer. If we win enough test matches, that's how they're framing this. They can't ignore us. They have to include us in something. And if it's an ICC event and we can get some support, then maybe they can afford to do it. Of course, that's the big thing at the minute. They can't really afford to play it much. They played Zimbabwe at home last year, but as a result of that, they cancelled, their word is postponed. We'll see if when it is postponed until the Australia series that they were supposed to host last year. We're still waiting actually on the summer fixtures officially. They were supposed to come out in January, then they're supposed to come out 2 weeks ago last week. It's just I don't know at this stage. I don't know what the moving parts are. In theory, they're supposed to be hosting Afghanistan in July time for a Red Bull game. Everything I've heard suggests that won't be the case. I was hoping that we might have some clarity on that coming on today, but we don't. So I think that kind of gives an idea of the cost aspect of it. So the only way this works and the only way Div 2 will work, because what are the issues that people have with Div 2? Money grab.
They don't want to be in it, right?
Well,
a lot of the countries won't want to be in it.
Well, you say that. I think Afghanistan, Ireland, and Zimbabwe would all love to be in it, right?
Yeah, but it's finding the other 3, right?
Well, it's 2. They're only going to do 5.
Okay.
So it's those 3, and at the minute it's Bangladesh and Windies.
Okay.
Those 5. Obviously, quoted Clive Lloyd in the piece saying none of these teams are going to get any better if they're just playing against each other. So what we mitigate against that, right? Every time you go to the UK, you got to play a test in Ireland. It's not part of the World Test Championship, or every time you go to India, you got to play Afghanistan and Greater Noida. Every time you go to South Africa, vice versa. And there are similar structures. Obviously, geographically, West Indies doesn't have that benefit of being near anyone, but there has to be a way of working around that. Div 1 has to pay for Div 2, so the windfall from the TV, because that's the other criticism, is that if Division 1 happens, it's cash grab. It's just India, Australia, England, more TV rights, more games against each other. That's fine. They can still get richer, but you also need to give a windfall so the Division 2 games can happen, because as we said, Ireland don't have a stadium. They can't afford to host it, really. I'm trying to remember what my other point was.
Well, the other key point, you summed it up really well, but the other key point was the promotion relegation element. Right?
Promotion relegation, yeah, absolutely.
And just before you go on, this is the fly in the ointment, the big concern for me, because I struggle to believe that if push comes to shove, they will sanction this. That in the way that, say, the European Super League or whatever it was called in football was deliberately designed to keep the big boys separate, unrelegatable, and mutually benefiting from this kind of cordoned off, siphoned off situation. I fear that promotion and relegation will not get past it, and if that is the case, then it consigns the traditional, as in the long-standing Test match teams, to playing, second tier cricket, and it creates a problem for the aspirational ones such as Ireland, Zimbabwe, Afghanistan, etc. I might be wrong, but my fear is that they won't allow for promotion relegation.
So there are all these caveats, right? So the only way, financially, it only works with the support of the ICC and the TV money from the top division, and it only works, the Clive Lloyd point about these guys aren't going to get better, again, not playing better teams. Okay, we can organise 1 or 2 games extra every year, which is what we said a second ago. But yeah, my theory was what South Africa playing here against Australia. When's that? First, second week of June or something, isn't it?
Roughly,
Week before, play Div 2, bottom of Div 1, top of Div 2, promotion relegation playoff. So at least it's palatable in that you can be terrible in Division 1 over the course of 2 years. But if you just play a one-off game against the West Indies or whoever, you can still survive. It's not like Premier League football, where the bottom 3, you're all just gone. You do get a second chance. That might make it slightly more palatable for these teams. But also, you're right. I mean, the sport is moving as a whole away from that model because people in charge want certainty, and certainty creates financial stability. You can sell your TV rights because you know American sports, there's no promotion, relegation, Super League with that kind of influence. So are they going to sign up for it? No. The point I made was at the end of the piece was that the ICC is supposed to be governing body. Everyone just says it's a members club, right? Well, what are they? Because if it's a governing body, this is a decision that they just make, right? But if they're a members club, then it's a big sticking point.
It's hard to imagine. Forget the chairman or the president of the BCCI walking in and saying,
well, he won't care. It's not going to affect him. India are never going to be in that position. Really.
No, sure, but it's not implausible. I know what you're saying, but it's not implausible. But I was going to say it's hard to imagine the BCCI agreeing, but it's just as hard to imagine the ECB agreeing. And the ECB, their team is a lot more erratic.
It might be them because they don't care about them.
Why would Richard Thompson walk into that meeting and say, do you know what, let's have a 2-tier system with promotion relegation, thus weakening our premium product for the sake of developing a broader Test match game potentially sometime down the line. I'd love to imagine that he would say that. I'd be surprised if he would.
I agree he won't. By the way, this is all very much wishful thinking. This was a kind of this is how you could do it. Is it going to happen? It's unlikely. But the one thing of that is not Thompson, Gould has come out and said he wants to save Test match cricket. He's going to give Zimbabwe some money this summer, right? The ECB have publicly put a target on their backs is the wrong way of describing it because they're saying the right thing, they're trying to do the right thing. But if then they then go and do that and say in an ICC meeting, actually, do you know what, we're not going to weaken our position to help other people. It was like, well, publicly you've said you're going to do that. So they have created a bit of a rod for their own backs there.
You imagine they finish 6th, lose a playoff, then they're in tier 2, saving the game from the bottom up.
Will never happen.
Never happen.
No, sadly not.
Anyway, moving on, a couple of quick questions for Nathan on Irish cricket. From our listeners. So Tectors Tweakers asks, question for Nathan, does he see any young batters breaking into the Irish team in any format in the next few years? And if so, who?
Good question.
Do I see it? No. Well, actually...
Give us a name or two.
Yeah, well, I'll start off some names. So to be fair to them, in this squad in Zimbabwe, they've actually called up a few blokes. And the big criticism of this kind of regime has been that they've just picked the same 15, 16 players. Harry Tector's younger brother, Tim, is in the T20 squad. He's scored a lot of domestic runs in the last couple of years. T20 cricket, he's worth keeping an eye on. He's like Harry, he's a middle order player, but he looked at the middle order and said, I'm not going to get a game there. So he's moved up to the top of the order the last 2 years. Chris de Freitas, South African born guy. He scored a lot of runs for the emerging Ireland team. I think he's qualified now, so he's worth keeping an eye on.
Any relation to Phil de Freitas?
I think so. Sadly, no. Actually, I've never met him, so I've never asked him that question. Actually, so I'll have to look that up. The other one, who's a bit of a left field one, and I can't see him getting in because I think if he was going to get a go, he would have. But I think it's definitely worth a look. It's got a bloke called Seamus Lynch, T20 batter. Has played a lot of smaller competitions and tends to whack it, but I think there's a few people in high positions who don't rate him, sadly, so he's not getting a go. Do I see these guys getting picked and getting runs? I mean, they haven't been in squads before now. They're now in a squad and they've picked, we'll see what happens on Tuesday, but for all the white ball games so far across each series, they haven't changed the 11, so they picked these guys and they just picked them to run the drinks for 3 weeks, so they don't have enough cricket below international level to it's this vicious cycle of there isn't enough cricket below international level to get these guys ready. But then if you haven't got that, how are you going to get them ready? You just have to throw them in the deep end at some point.
Elsewhere, the BBL final hero Mitchell Owen whacked 149 off 69 balls in a 50-over game between Tasmania and South Australia. So he's going well at the moment. Some really big county championship signing news in the last week. So Essex have signed Shardul Thakur for 7 county championship games. He was not picked up in the IPL auction. He can still be picked up. So if a franchise says, we'll have you, Shardul, and Shardul says yes, it exists within the contract that he can go and play in the IPL. But if he plays for Essex...
The Cloud FM or Eden Gardens, eh?
What a signing that could be.
Yeah.
He's tearing it up at the moment in the Randy Trophy. So that's really exciting.
Yeah. Shardul Thakur in April and May, bowling those wobblers and coming in at number 6 or 7.
Alongside Cook and Porter.
That's an eye-watering setup, that. And could be an inspired signing. I just hope that, from an Essex point of view, that it actually happens.
Yeah.
Does that get them closer to the title?
Possibly. I still don't see anyone beating Surrey, but we'll talk about that. My God, a lot over the next few weeks.
Just got to make sure your Cape Verde trip ends before the big county preview, Phil.
Mate, I'll phone it in.
Yeah.
I'll phone it in from a catamaran somewhere. Don't worry about that.
Another massive bit of signing news. Gloucestershire have signed Cam Green for 5 county championship games.
Hold on.
Thanks to a donation from a mystery benefactor. That's amazing. If you're really rich and listening to this, by the way, and you kind of like county cricket, can you just please do this a bit more?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were going to say, can you pay for someone more famous to come on the podcast?
that too. But that is an amazing signing, an outstanding signing announcement video.
Oh, what a video.
From Gloucestershire. If you haven't seen that, check out the Gloucestershire socials. So that's great to see. Mark Stoneman has signed for Hampshire. It looks like that's a reaction to the James Vince news that James Vince is not going to be playing in the championship this year. And as of this morning, Josh Little has been signed for Middlesex, predominantly to play in the Blast, but reading the press release, Nathan, it has opened up the possibility that he might also play red ball cricket.
It's been mentioned. There have been conversations in Middlesex and with Josh Little about the possibility. My understanding of the situation was him signing in the PSL and getting picked up there might throw a spanner or two in the works. But yeah, I think he's keen to play more red ball. He's been training red ball cricket with Ireland in recent weeks. Remember we were all here a few years ago and it was a huge controversy. He wasn't playing in that test match here at Lords. So that would be very interesting. So Josh Little isn't the only overseas signing Middlesex have got this year. Kane Williamson is the other at the moment. We're obviously based at Lords, and you can watch Williamson and Little play in the Blast at Lords. They've got 4 fixtures here. The first one's on May the 29th. Adult tickets start from £33. There are dedicated tickets for under 25s that remain at £29, and under 16s get in for £7. You can get more savings on tickets for multiple matches with the Blast Pass and group offers. All early bird pricing ends on May the 7th. Some other news. Alex Hales is set to miss the entire English summer to play Night Riders cricket in a variety of leagues. And there was a very fun and weird innings from Sam Constas in the Sheffield Shield. Where
I didn't click on the link.
10 off 7. First innings of the game, multiple attempted ramps off Scott Boland, and he ends up getting bowled off a failed ramp off Boland. And then the second innings,
what game? In a Shield game?
Shield game. And the second innings, he's like 10 off 27. So he bats normally in the second innings. So, yeah, strange from
Just very briefly on the Williamson thing. Smart move, isn't it? Clever, and clever PR as well to have him, if you like, cross-pollinating, right? Across...
Very well timed.
Yeah, across Middlesex stuff and London Spirit as well. I reckon the MCC have had a good say in all of that, and perhaps old Elvis Nicholas might have pulled out one or two stops there. I like it. Very clever.
Probably one thing that has gone under the radar with this signing a little bit is it means a change of captaincy at the Spirit. That's quite significant. Isn't
Huge.
It?
Hold the back page.
Well, that's what happened. Like, just given it's Dan Lawrence and he's an England player. That's quite it's an interesting one to say the least. I find it fascinating that they've signed him for the 100 team because he's Kane Williams in a short format batter. I think that probably tells you that the quality of pitches, and they're expecting the ball to move around a lot again this summer.
I can't believe, in a good way, that we're talking about the 100 and inner dynamics of the London Spirit in February. What a build-up. What a build-up.
What was it, Google Spirit?
So Brydon Carse, we talked about him earlier in the show. He's been in the spotlight this winter. While it's not quite gone to plan with the white ball this year, he was arguably England's player of the Test winter. He caught up with Joe Harman a couple of weeks ago. Here's a snippet of that conversation. For the full interview, get the new Wisden Cricket Monthly out this week.
So yeah, signed by the Sunrisers at the November auction. It feels like that maybe sums up how fast your career has been moving over the last 4 or 5 months, because only last summer you were having your enforced break from the game. Now you're playing for England in all formats, on the verge of your first IPL season. Could you have imagined you'd be where you are now when you were watching from the sidelines midway through last summer?
Yeah, I think, looking back at that summer, it almost feels a really long time ago now. And I was actually having a conversation with a close friend of mine the other day, and he actually said that. He said, look at how quick things have happened over the last 5-6 months. I think I probably haven't had the time to sit back and reflect on everything that's happened, because everything's been, happening quite quickly. But yeah, certainly, over the moon where I'm at the moment. And yeah, I've pretty much put all of that other stuff behind me, and it's exciting for what lies ahead. Obviously, the IPL and then a big summer of cricket, hopefully with England as well.
I spoke to Graham Onions a few weeks ago, and he said, while obviously being banned must have been a difficult time for you in a lot of ways, he also thought there was some benefits to it as well, in that you had a lot of time to work on your skills in a way that players don't often do this these days, because the schedule is just so relentless. Would you agree with that? Did you have a chance to do work that you otherwise wouldn't have done?
Yeah, 100%. I think when that initial period of that time away from cricket, I kind of switched off from it all and didn't do a lot for the first month. But, then I sat down. Obviously, I was based up in Durham, and I sat down with a couple of the coaches there, and Graham Onions was a massive part of that for me, because I try to take all the positives around it all. It was the middle of the summer, so I didn't have to train indoors. So I had access, to facilities all the time. And he was someone that I worked with on a one-to-one basis, for, a block of 6 weeks. For the first time probably in my career where I, was able to work on things, being fully fit, and really paying attention to detail to a couple of things that I wanted to improve. So credit goes, to Graham as well, because I really enjoyed working with him, and he was someone that I hadn't worked with, before, on that level. So yeah, that was an exciting time, and some of it's paid off so far over the winter.
Could you give a bit more detail on some of the specifics that you were working on? Was this related to pace, or?
Yeah, initially a lot of it was around my red ball game. I felt that, certain roles that I had sometimes been used prior to me coming back from that time off was, hit the wicket hard, try and bowl quick. But I really wanted to focus on, my consistency with my line and length, because I felt at the time that, I personally felt that there was more to my bowling than, just coming up and trying to bowl short and trying to make something happen, where I feel like I could have developed the skill of being more consistent in my line and length, and maybe adding a couple more skills, whether that be working on an in-swinger or working with an older ball, trying to get it to reverse. So he had all his cameras up, and we made training quite fun. He would set certain challenges. Can I consistently hit that 6 to 8 yard length? And yeah, we had a bit on it, whether it was lunch or a coffee after training, just to keep that intensity up throughout that period of time.
And even if you're able to make those technical improvements and physical improvements, mentally it must have been a very tough period for you. How were you able to get through it mentally? Who helped you out in particular, and did you pick up any other hobbies to get you through that period, or were you focused on the cricket and coming back?
Yeah, I think at the time, my partner came up and she was staying with me for the initial 6 weeks because she had time off. And we went away on holiday. And I've got quite a good close-knit circle up in the Northeast. There's a couple of people that I spend a lot of time with. And I just made sure that I was, spending time with them in that initial 6 weeks. Once I came back into the cricket and back training, things became probably a bit easier because I had a little bit more structure to my days. But yeah, look, I towards the end of that summer, I probably didn't really have any England cricket on my radar. I was preparing to come back and play the last 4 championship games for Durham. But then obviously, played that one-day series against Australia at the back end of the summer. And I felt like I hit the ground running, which was always, probably a little bit in the back of my mind, after that much time off and then coming straight back into playing international cricket. You always have those certain insecurities or a few doubts. But then again, credit goes to, the people at the ECB and those other people who I spend a lot of time with. They made that transition very, very easy. And throughout the whole process, I felt supported and backed. And ultimately, I just wanted to give back to English cricket at the time for them showing faith in me.
Yeah, there would have been a period, I guess, of a couple of months where you knew the investigation was happening. You probably knew you were facing some kind of ban and were just having to sit and wait. During that period, were you fearing it could be worse than it turned out to be?
Yeah, potentially. But throughout that whole process, I was thorough with everything that I gave and all the information that was needed and pretty honest about everything. I think the most annoying thing was probably just there was a period of like 4 to 6 weeks where I was waiting for a decision to be made.
Yeah.
But once that decision was made, it took me a couple of weeks to get my head around things, and then I put a plan in process.
And then England very quickly got you back involved, and obviously you've had a fantastic winter away. And you've kind of backed up Rob Key's belief, which he's been very open about, that stacks of wickets in county cricket don't necessarily mean someone will excel at test level. There are bowlers out there with better county records than you. You've got a good record, but there are some bowlers with a better record. But they saw attributes in you that they thought meant you would prosper at the test level or international level in general. And you've shown that already. So why do you think you've had success at test level that hasn't always been replicated in the county game for you?
I think there's a massive difference in the conditions that you're playing in.
Yeah.
And I know that obviously my first taste of test cricket was in Pakistan, where the wickets were incredibly flat and not much pace. But I just think, now the pace and carry out in New Zealand helped me a lot. I think traditionally in county cricket, the majority of the games, 7 to 8 games are played at the start of the season, and potentially might not suit, my attributes that allow me to take wickets. There was definitely certain attributes of my cricket that I've played at Durham over the last couple of years where, back in the day, traditionally Durham was a green seamer and quite friendly to seam bowling. But over the last 4 or 5 years, I think if you have a look at the scores at Durham, it's quite a docile wicket and slow and flat. So using the short pitch bowling that I have done for Durham in the past probably, stood me in good stead for some of the spell that I was bowling out in Pakistan and New Zealand. I think that's definitely a factor. I think also, coming back, and when I came back to playing cricket at the end of the summer, I think some people don't realize how much of a clean slate it felt for me to get everything that was hanging over my head away, from me and almost start afresh and almost a bit of a point to prove. And, currently I'm not going to look back on that. And I think that's been a massive positive for me.
Phil, the new Wisden Cricket Monthly is out on Thursday, and it contains what I think is a genuinely brilliant feature, 100 hundreds that changed the game. Talk me through the process of it, because it was quite the undertaking.
Yeah, it was an idea that Joe and I came up with. We felt it was time for a list. The punters like a list, so we scrabbled around for an idea and came up with the 100 hundreds that changed the world. And then we thought, even by our standards, that's a little bit over egging the pudding. So 100 hundreds that changed the game and a few that changed the world. And then we thought, that'd make a really good book. But we've got to do a magazine first. It may yet become a book one day. So then we got talking to people who know more about cricket than Joe and me.
What? They exist?
Oh, God, yeah.
Whoa.
The likes of Rob Smythe, David Woodhouse, who wrote the book about the Hutton tour of the West Indies in the 50s that won all the awards, like a walking cricket encyclopedia. Andrew Miller, Cricinfo. Abhishek Mukherjee, one of the is he the boss of Wisden India? Or he's one of the big players at Wisden India? And various other people who know more, especially more about the history of the game, the long distant faded history, to try and develop a list. And it grew to about 200, and then we managed to whittle it down to 150, and finally we got down to 100. Kind of trying to major on innings, not just that are brilliant, but innings that shifted the dial a little bit on the game. So we go all the way back to 1836. That's the earliest one, I think. In fact, there might be an earlier one than that, but 1836 was. You'll remember this, Yas. The great Alfred Min, of course, playing for the South against the North in Leicester, August 1836. And just for a taste of the kind of stuff that we're going on about here, Alfred Min, a hulking all-rounder adored by the English public, writes Joe, understood the value of putting on a good show, and his most memorable turn from a colourful career spanning 28 years would have far-reaching consequences. He was struck on the ankle in the lead up to a showdown between England's premier cricketers, and Min was targeted on the ankle by a fellow called Sam Redgate, the express quick of the North, and received numerous blows to the ankle. And Min, the Lion of Kent, as he was known, met fire with fire, dispatched Redgate to all parts on his way to 100. First maiden first-class 100. As he staggered off the pitch, Min, with a busted ankle but 100 to his name, it was described by David Frith, as the historian David Frith, as a fearful sight. The leg, usually the size of Goliath's, was grotesque from swelling and inflammation. It was unbelievable that a man could have stood on it, let alone batted, for 5 hours. His enormous frame, Min's enormous frame, he's a famous big drinker and imbiber, was hefted onto the roof of a stagecoach, where he was taken to a London hospital for emergency treatment. It was touch and go whether he lost his leg, whether it would have to be amputated, but he eventually regained full use of it, returned to cricket 2 years later, and of course that precipitated the use of leg guards, right? So pads became de rigueur after
I was wondering
Min
where you're going with
almost
that.
lost his leg. And so the game shifted on that moment, you know. But there's any number of, if you like, signature points through the game's history.
And an amazing diversity in what's been chosen as well. There'll be hundreds that people know, and there'll be hundreds that you've definitely never heard of, like that one.
Yeah, it's hard to order them into a list of 100 with any kind of authority whatsoever. It's slightly odd to put sort of Alfred Min against Ashley Gardner and
Dean Elgar.
Yeah, and Dean Elgar. Sachin makes it in for his 326, I think it was, not out as a 15-year-old. That makes it in.
And his Desert Storm 100.
Does that make the cut? I think it does make the cut.
I wrote it, so I hope
no, that does make the cut. So then we assembled a team of writers because Joe and me couldn't get through 26,000 words in a week between us. You wrote a few. Some of the names I just mentioned, they wrote some as well, and we managed to pull it all together. It was a real joy to do, and
to read as well. Because I was only loosely involved with it, so when I got the full list, I didn't know what the final 100 were, and I obviously hadn't read any of the contributions. It is genuinely brilliant.
I hope so. I hope so, because it took a long frigging time.
I mean, we could literally do. I said this to Joe. We could literally do 100 episodes in the podcast on it. We're going to do one on the Patreon this week, and we're going to include a little snippet of that on next week's show. Phil, what else is in the magazine?
I think I might have mentioned it. It certainly flagged it up, but Mel Farrell sat down with Temba Bavuma in South Africa during the SA20, and he's rapidly becoming one of the most important voices in the game. He speaks so eloquently with such passion and feeling, great emotional intelligence, talks of his story, but not in in an overblown or schmaltzy kind of way. There's a kind of a vitalness to everything that he says. You know, he doesn't ever waste a word, and he's now also backing it up by showing what a good player he is, what an outstanding player he is. And I've been banging on about this for years, that he's been criminally underrated for perhaps slightly questionable or murky reasons as well. And as someone very close to the team said to Mel, he's only ever one shit innings away from being another quota player, and that's what he's lived with. And to have emerged as the natural figurehead and conscience of that team that's doing really good things, and potentially 3 or 4 months away from making history here when he leads that team into the world final against Australia. It's a beautiful and significant story, and Mel tells it very, very well.
And also many people's estimations, the second favourites for the Champions Trophy at the moment.
For sure, yeah. And again, he's batting nicely there at 3. Katya's done a really, really nice and sensitive piece about motherhood in cricket. And following on from what Dan Gallen wrote about fatherhood in cricket a couple of issues ago, she's spoken to a number of female cricketers and how they balance the real world with the game. Spoke to Natalie Siver-Brunt about her experiences. She froze her eggs. And again, these are the pieces that we do really well, I think, if we give it to the right writers. Obviously, these human stories as filtered through the prism of the game, and she's done that characteristically brilliantly. She's far too good for her age. And him, wrote a really nice piece as discussed on Irish cricket. Adam Hollyoake, New Kent coach, does his bit with Sam Dalling, who's been contributing to us now on a monthly basis for the last year or so. He's a really, really good freelancer. Graham Onions on his career. Liam Thomas, the disability cricketer, talks about his journey through the game. Really, really lovely feature that as well, as you say, Brydon Carse. And bits and bobs here and there. It's been a big one to pull together, but I'm proud of it. And for mine, as Dooley would say, it's the best front cover we've ever done. Joe Provis, our designer, initially didn't realise quite how big and overblown this 100 thing was, and so he did his style, very stylish, quite refined, bit minimalist. And I said, no, this is a monster. You got to throw everything at it. And I said, you got to think kind of Monty Python's Flying Circus, sort of an assault on your senses, cartoonish like imagery and as much as you can possibly throw at it, and really, really go to town. And so he came back with something else, which I think is magnificent. So I think it looks good. It always reads good. And it's remarkably cheap. So, go and get it, folks. Keep us in work.
The new magazine is out on Thursday. As always, head to the link in our description to get your hands on a copy. That is everything for today's podcast. Cheers, listeners. Cheers, Phil. Cheers, Nathan. Good to have you on the show for the first time. We'll be back on the Patreon on Wednesday for people after the England-Afghanistan game.